Welcome, everyone. I'm Molly Taylor. I'm the Deputy Director of Telfair Museums, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us tonight to celebrate one of the many highlights of Telfair Museum's important work in our community, commissioning artwork and exhibiting the work of local artists. Savannah painter extraordinaire Katherine Sandoz received Telfair's largest commission to date to create the mural you might have already seen on the third floor, as well as the Atrium installation that undoubtedly you walked under as you came in. I hope you saw it. In addition to supporting local art, Telfair serves our community in large and small ways. In 2018, we had a record 210,000 people come through the doors of our 3 sites, seeing transformative traveling exhibitions like Monet to Matisse Masterworks of French Impressionism from the Dixon Gallery and Gardens, to the Open Road Photography and the American Road Trip, to our brand new Owens Thomas House basement, newly renovated in November. On the smaller side, for over a decade, we have been serving 300 4- and 5-year-old Head Start kids each spring. In 2018, they saw photographs by preeminent contemporary artist Carrie Mae Weems and made art in the studios, driving home the fact that art is fun and this museum is theirs. Seeing those tiny people look at art and working on their own commissions is about as heartwarming as it gets. Join us in helping Telfair Museums to grow and expand in this bright new century. Become a member, give a donation, help us out because we are your museum too. I want to just give a short plug for things that are going on next week. We have our Pulse Art and Technology Festival, which is a really exciting and annual event. This is the 12th one. On Wednesday, the 23rd, from 6 to 8 here at the Jepson Center, we will have a conversation with Keita Takahashi, the star of Pulse next week, with a reception to follow. Projections will be done on the walls of the Jepson Center by John Collette, a celebrated designer and professor at SCAD. Members are free, non-members $8. We do suggest you sign up in advance because there will be a lot of people. Thursday, January 31st at 6 p.m., again, right here where you're sitting, will be the last look of Monet to Matisse lecture. Rihab Bagnoli, again, a professor at SCAD, will do a lecture on the impact of modernity on Impressionist art. And again, it's free for members, $8 for non. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much to be had at Telfair, and we are grateful to have you here tonight. Now I would like to introduce Rachel Reese, our Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art. Rachel.
Thank you, Molly, and Happy New Year, museum members or future museum members. Do we have any artists here tonight? Did anyone sign up with the artist membership promo that we're running today? Welcome to the museum. Artists are the backbone of what we do here. 2 years ago, we started a program called Art 912. We formally initiated a program that aligns with the directives of the museum that we've been continuing to promote the visibility and support the vitality of artists living and working in Savannah, of which this major commission is certainly a part. So if you did not sign up tonight and would like to, please see Callie or someone wearing a Telfair tag and grab them before you leave. It's been a really exciting few weeks here at the museum as we've been installing these 2 works. And 1 year in someone else's timeline might feel like a long time, but in the museum world, 1 year goes by really fast. And that's how long Katherine and I have been working on this project, just shy of 1 year ago. I want to talk with you a little bit about the commission process and the invitation to work that I proposed Katherine to work here at the museum. And then I'm going to turn it over to Katherine, who's going to speak about her artistic process and the evolution of her work over the past few decades, particularly since living in Savannah, as well as talk about the commission process itself. As you know, the Jepson Center really changed the environment of downtown Savannah. Not only did it create and emblemize the future and the future vision of Telfair Museums, but it also literally changed the built environment of historic downtown, particularly here in Telfair Square, through its architectural presence. One of the key visible characteristics of the building is our dramatic atrium space. Moshe Safdie's vision for this atrium, the glass facade, the high sloped glass ceiling, and the tall limestone walls, was to design a space between public and private, between citizen and the institution, and to bring the outside natural world inside and vice versa. As I've been here for 3 years, the Atrium is a place I think a lot about. Whose and what type of work would best embody those architectural ideals? Who and what would also make an impact in this liminal space between public and private, art and community? About a year ago, I did a studio visit with Katherine in her Vernonburg home, which is in South Savannah, where she paints in a space that's a hybrid of inside and outside, flooded with natural light. And Katherine is primarily a painter. Her layered compositions are informed by the natural world, inspired by changing light and the seasons. And really through that layering, her paintings have a luminescence to them. They glow from within. She's a formalist, no doubt. She thinks about things like color, space, line, texture, composition. But she's also a conceptualist. She has layered ideas and meanings embedded in all of her work. And so she's really following a trajectory of modern artists working before or alongside her. Artists like Calder, O'Keeffe, Helen Frankenthaler, Joni Mitchell, any number of expressionists or impressionists, minimalists, as well as contemporary artists like Alex Katz or David Hockney. So after the studio visit, I invited Katherine to think about how to explode those layers in her painting into three-dimensional space, how to make multiple visible layers in a public-facing work, and how to take the unique, and by unique I mean sometimes difficult, characteristics of our atrium and create an engaging public work. Katherine was a little terrified at first, but readily took up the charge and accepted the challenge. From there, we embarked on a commission process that lasted about 11 months and evolved through 5 or 6 versions of the work, finally landing on the work as you see it in our atrium now. The goals that we set up for this project were achieved. We were able to create a work that activated the atrium space and aligns with the architectural ideals intended for it. It works within those engineering guidelines and restrictions, which Katherine will mention briefly tonight. Katherine's vision beautifully brings the outside world in and the inside world out, and it encourages active looking. Even though it is static, it will evolve over time. The light conditions in the city will change, light will refract through the work and bounce onto our limestone walls. It embodies the power of teamwork and collaboration, as all public work requires. And importantly, it inspires curiosity and requires something of all of us. And that's something I ask you to think about as you move through our building. Look at the work as you ascend or descend the stairs, walk up to the 3rd floor bridge, and look at it from an aerial perspective. Think about yourself in terms of physical or conceptual scale. Finally, Katniss confirms the power of commissioning work by living artists. What happens when we all financially support the arts? And by extension, that means supporting living people who make art for their career. This project is a perfect example of that, and I was very excited that this is the largest commission this museum has made in support of a living artist to date. A few quick thank yous are in order. Sonia Wallen, our buildings curator, Jessica Estes, Milutin Pavlovich, Heath Rich, our exhibitions team here at the museum, and Julio Garcia of Price Street Projects, who was an integral collaborator from day one. Without further ado, I want to introduce Katherine Sandoz. Katherine holds double MFAs in painting and illustration from Savannah College of Art and Design, where she also taught for 9 years. She's lived in Savannah with her family since the mid-1990s. Her work is represented by Spalding Nix in Atlanta and Laney Contemporary here in Savannah. Please join me in welcoming Katherine Sandoz.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Telfair Museums. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces in the crowd. I'm going to talk a little bit about my history and then talk about the projects I graduated with two BFAs, French and International Relations from Mount Holyoke College many moons ago. And then I started working in advertising, first in New Orleans, then in Providence, and then in Boston. And working there, I really became excited by and enamored with these strategies that advertisers use to make messages. And I had been working as an account planner, which means I was running focus groups, making qualitative and quantitative studies, and I wanted to move over to the creative suite. So I talked with my bosses, and we decided that I would go to graduate school, and maybe I could come back and be an art director or a creative director. So I packed my bags and left the dreary cold of Boston and looked for something more tropical. And SCAD had a provisional program in illustration, which was great because I needed provisional study. I knew very little about making images. And this was a time when we didn't Google, we didn't carry our phones, we went to the library to do research, and we took pictures with film and then waited for them to be developed in order to make our pictures. And so this is where I learned the elements and principles of art, the building blocks that we use to make the pictures. And so when I started to put these tools together with the strategies, it was very exciting, and it provided great results. And then SCAD offered a position in teaching in the illustration department, and I took it and taught there for about 9 years. At the same time, I was illustrating, I was exhibiting paintings, and I was curating at Café Metropole, which many of you frequented and loved. And then I started studying painting at SCAD, so a second MFA program, which is a great benefit of working there. At the same time, I was starting to think about the role that art can play, and I feel like there's a spectrum. It starts with play, moves on to decor and beautification, and then there's reportage, works that say, I'm here, you're here. They mark history and time and place. And then there are works that help you to reimagine or to innovate or solve problems. And then there are works that are transformative, and then maybe the best ones are transcendent. I think most artists work right in the middle, and where I do that is here, in this barn behind my house, and then in a second barn behind that barn, which belongs to my very generous neighbor, who lets me work there about 10 months out of the year. And I think she'd let me stay there 12 months if it weren't cold. So my work is informed still by drawing and illustration, by the waterways. And I'm sorry about that slide, that's a new problem. That didn't happen last night. So regardless of the media that I use, I'm still working with those principles and elements, the line, the color, the value, the pattern, the texture, looking to the seasons, and to what I consider a very unique type of space in this landscape, very deep. And then you see how that translates into the work that I'm doing right now. Also, still using reference, even though the works are quite abstract. Around 2012, I became interested in public art, and I worked with an organization called Seesaw, See Savannah Art Walls. I think many of you came to this wall while it's being installed. It was at 34th and Habersham, and it depicted an island that's just due east of this location, Turtle Island. It's the last barrier island before the Atlantic. I also worked with companies like Judge Realty and Agabuzi Fine Art to create other public works. This is a facade of flowers that are made from recycled trash bags. And the trustees' garden ladies collected those bags for me for several months so that I could create that installation. And then I started working in fibers, so those botanicals are silk and copper. And then there were paintings. And then in yet another public work, I made a mural that was some 1,800 square feet. And this was an interesting job because we had to permit with the city and also with the Department of Transportation. And that this wall is right near the post office on Abercorn. But it really beautifies the apartment complex that's situated there. And then you can see, I think this is mid-installation, but all the botanicals and trees and flora that's depicted in the wall connect to the pond, but also to the trees on the other side of the road. I was collaborating with individuals like Harrison Scott Key, who was writing for the Oxford American. Very funny stories. He's just published his second book. The first one received a Thurber Prize for humor, so I definitely recommend the second one. I think it's better than the first. And then I was working with Salted and Styled, which was a food-inspired living blog, and Libby Summers and Chia Chong were featuring artisans, makers, cooks, really anyone who was doing something interesting in this region. And so I did paintings and illustration and mixed media works for them. And at the same time, I had been blogging from 2006 to about 2013. And this was the way we had outreach back in the day. So I introduced myself to the West Coast, and a lot of bloggers who had lifestyle blogs were very positive about my work, and that opened up some doors with designers and event planners on the West Coast. And now, as you know, we have Instagram, but that and social media have become an integral part of the commerce of making and selling artwork. Oops. This is a most recent commission for State Farm Arena in Atlanta. It's a diptych, and it measures 5 by 16, 2 pieces, and it can be arranged left, right, or right, left. So it's almost like a repeat pattern, but just on the east-west sides. And so while I've had exhibitions in these cities, it is Laney Contemporary in Savannah and Spalding Nick's Fine Art in Atlanta that cements this marriage of art and commerce that I enjoy the year round. But as Savannah is my home and my home port of call, it's where I center my philanthropic efforts, where I work with schools and teachers. I offer an internship program. Students from SCAD and Armstrong and from the community come into the studio throughout the year. When Rachel asked me to consider this project, I, of course, was eager to speak with her about its possibility. Rachel has a background in sculpture. She's a writer, a researcher. She's a scientist of artists in their studios. And she's also an interpreter of the museum's mission. And I think she definitely acts in the roles that I outlined as the artist acting in, but as curator, she really prompts artists to make new things. And I had never made a sculpture. I had never hung anything on a ceiling, so this was all new. Julio Garcia and I met in the late 90s. He was studying painting at SCAD. He's painter, printmaker, designer, contractor, architect. Some of you know his shipping container home that he built on Bonaventure. Julio and I worked at Metropole, where he was an intern at one point with the art program. And he has founded a design and fabrication company in Miami. So I thought of him first to help me realize this project with the museum. Jim Goodlow and I have also known each other from the Metropole days, and Jim was the one-time teacher of mine at SCAD in an online learning course so that I could become an online teacher. He has provided professional advice throughout the years, and he really was a sounding board throughout the entire process, starting in March until now. And he visited during the installation period, and I asked him to paint on the mural as well. And I think he took some 500 pictures, which was wonderful, a great service to me. The exhibition team, so very professional, so very precise. I appreciated them so much because they like to do things in a line like I do. And also Heath was a classmate of mine in the painting department, so we had that long history too. And that was helpful when there were items that I was interested in stressing. So 9 very essential collaborators and about 40 other assistants and helpers, and I'll list that at the very end. This is the subject of these 2 works. This is a Katniss plant, and I found this plant, this beautiful plant, in a ditch, the Savannah ditch at a friend's home, behind a friend's home. The Katniss is called many, many names, but it does come from the genus Sagittaria, which means arrowhead, and you see the characteristic leaves there. And what struck me about this plant and this ditch is that it seemed to be a very complete universe, just right there in an unlikely place. And while I had taken this picture, I think in 2013 or 14, I didn't know what to use it for, but when we started talking about the atrium piece and just the characteristics of the building, this seemed the perfect subject. So as Rachel mentioned, we had 19 points from which to hang the atrium piece, and we did have a very specific weight that we were using, so no point could have more than 30 pounds hanging. Very rough sketches to begin with. And just some roughs of how the atrium piece might interact with the 3rd floor piece. And then these are my children's school folders that I cut up at a baseball game to see how some of the colors might interact. And then this is just a paper model that's hung between 2 stools in my kitchen. We communicated through emails and computer programs, the computer-aided design programs that Julio uses at Price Street Projects. And then I use something called Procreate, which allows me to draw on the iPad. And we would just send these messages back and forth until we had a very precise plan of how each drop would hang and where in the atrium it would hang. These are the plexiglass sheets and the representative colors. Kay Wolfersberger, who is a designer now living in Brooklyn, helped me with these. She's someone that I also met at SCAD. We used 108 pieces. And the reason that I used 108 is that it's a very auspicious number. Some say it represents that the universe is one, nothing, and infinite. But more importantly, in some disciplines, for example, in Buddhism, there are 108 steps to reaching nirvana. You have 108 forms in Shaolin Wing Chun Kung Fu, in Silam Tao, 108 beads on the mala. The list goes on. Then there's some pop usages, 108 stitches on the Major League Baseball. And I know we have one mathematician in the crowd who could explain to you how interesting this number is, but I will not. Here's some photos from Julio's shop. Here we're testing how the plexiglass hangs, how it intersects, if it drapes or not. And after testing that, then all the pieces were cut, they were numbered, and they were lettered, so that when they arrived in this crate at the museum, the team would know which drop went where. So 494 pounds, or the size of a grown crocodile. So here again with the strategies, you see we're starting to stack up some of these strategies and the way that someone might experience the piece. All the pieces laid out and the associated hardware. And then this lift that brings one small person way up into the top of the atrium. It's not something that I would want to do, but he does it very well. And again, we weighed each drop each time, just to make sure that we were in keeping with the recommendation of the engineers. So the really great thing about this piece, I think, are the intersections of the pieces of plexiglass and the new colors that appear by those intersections, and even better, the light that's thrown on the walls. And that will just increase when the angle of the sun changes, spring to summer. So now we have the repetition, the change, along with that scale change. And just a word on the scale change, I did think of making the building act like the pond, and then the scale of the leaves were that of the ditch, and then we become maybe a one-celled animal or a water bug. Here's an early study for the site-specific painting. The blank wall. Did see a lot of visitors from all over the world. This was an interesting bunch, 4 people traveling together. The second man, he turned out to have founded an agency that was the father agency of the one that I was working for in Providence. And he was friends with this couple from Atlanta who are friends with Spalding Nix. And that took about 30 seconds to discover. So that's one of those examples of acknowledgement of time and place and people. And though this is a temporary piece, that is a less temporary fact. I let a lot of children draw on the wall and some young adults. And again, I think, as with all public art, it does acknowledge time and place, and also it potentially allows each of us to reimagine ourselves. And we're different from the day before. Also, maybe it offers some solutions that we hadn't thought of. I certainly learned from the children attacking the wall. They're very brave. And I saw some individuals who I've known since the first moments that I was in the city. Jane Fishman is an author. She's a gardener, and she has been a journalist for many years. She's covered civic life in Savannah. And she's been a very fun and indulgent listener throughout the years. I think she is someone who transforms lives. I wanted to make sure that the shapes in the atrium piece related very well to the site-specific piece, so I did take several of the plexiglass pieces up the stairs and then traced them with chalk and then painted them and made sure they were very similar to color, in color. And then a note on representing the subject. I did not want it to be an illustration. I wanted the painting to exploit the layers and the colors and the feeling of moisture in the ditch. And so I think this is where artists talk about a piece having 2 subjects, and that is what you're seeing and then the paint itself. And in a moment of playfulness, I superimposed the constellation Sagittarius onto the painting. And someone, as we were coming in to the atrium, this this evening. He said, "What about this red paint?" And the stars are in red paint, so good job. That's how you find it. Overall, I have repeated the circle shape of the flower and also the arrow head shape. And then if you use your X-ray vision and you look at the top piece and the bottom piece, it makes the composition again. And that's the symbol of the universe, which is what so struck me with that Katniss plant. I wanted to say one thing about the security team. They made sure that I got into the building at any hour I wished and opened doors for me and just generally looked out for me. And they also popped their heads out of doors several times per day to say, "You're doing a good job." And I want to return and say, "You did a good job." They were great. A few notes and numbers. 10 months, 1 day, 10 days of painting, 9 lunches at the gray market. 9. And you can see the other numbers, but miraculously it all adds up to 108. Upcoming, I'm having a show at Laney Contemporary. The opening is March 14th. I hope you can join if you're here in town. And then I'm also having a show at Spalding Nick's Fine Art, a 2-person show with Carlisle Wolfe. And she is another person who's inspired by nature. And that opening is March 29th. And last but not least, my dear ex-professor, Suzanne Jackson, my thesis advisor, front and center, is showing a retrospective here starting June 28th, and I'm so excited for it. I hope you all come to that. And here's my list of credits. Thank you all. And then I've been asked to say I'll take questions. Good. I covered everything. Oh. The kids are great, I mean. And the stories, I'll tell you one. A Turkish woman, visiting from Turkey, she sits down on the bench, I'm painting, and she says, "I know you've been to the botanical gardens in Singapore." And I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "No, you have." I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Well, you need to go." She said, "Of course you're unencumbered and not married," which I'm neither one. But then she just went on to say all these things about how I'll be traveling shortly, and she was a real joy. But there were several experiences like that, and the kids are fabulous. They're just so excited and so brave at the wall, and so that was a great part. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the aerial installation.
Yes.
Are they supported by one point so they're balanced?
No, not all of them. I think I understand what you're asking. The larger pieces have a diagonal wire as well because their own weight is a bit too much. Yeah. We figured out a lot of stuff.
I'm looking forward to going back and looking at it.
Thank you.
I'm curious because Julio was also one of my favorite students that I gave a lot of trouble to.
Yes,
What type of
I remember.
conversations did you have in the whole process of cutting out? And I'm really proud of you all.
Thank you. Well, we're proud to have been your students. Well, I speak for myself, maybe not Julio, but
I'm just curious because the conversation, especially.
there were a lot of conversations. How many emails? I mean, there are just so many. 800, and I mean, that doesn't count phone conversations and texting. This team was unflappable. I mean, we did a really good job communicating. Everything was predicated on the engineering, so that changes the way you create, because you know you have to work to those specifications. But Julio's, he's such a positive, enthusiastic person that really, it was wonderful. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, it's, you know, both of you as adventurers, I think.
What kind?
As adventurers.
Oh, thank you.
Adventurous students. Adventurous.
Well, he's a fearless adventurer, and I am not. But we adventure. Yeah. Yes, Beth?
How did the pieces stay on the rods? How did you figure out how to, you know, is there like a stopper or something?
Yes.
And he figured that part out?
Yes. So there's a rod, then there's a attachment, and then there's aeronautic aviation wire, and then there's a sandwich between the plexi, and that locks in too. So each piece is locked on the line. Thanks. Hi.
I'm amazed at your speedy transition from, in your advertising life, when you said you wanted to be on the creative side of things, leaping to grad school, and then starting teaching like immediately after. That's amazing. So you must have done some creative work before you decided you wanted.
No, it was amazing. I mean, it stunned me too, and I never wanted to teach, and I did it for 9 years. It was an unusual time. I mean, I think I just hit it right, and
You must have just kind of
a lot of things happened,
your destination on this get there.
but I don't think 25 years is quick. You know, in the sense of it, I guess maybe it's in the telling, but it took a long time.
Were you involved in creative endeavors before, I'm sure, for grad school? I mean, while you were at the agency or like on your own?
Yeah, I had done some projects, but I was not yet an artist. I was a student of artists, and I was a student of storytellers. I mean, I've always liked to understand how the book or the story or the ad works. That helps with teaching, even if you don't know what you're doing on the board. I don't know if that helps. It was fast, it was unusual. I won the job, and I grew into it. And I'm very much edified for having done so. I mean, I was the winner. Yeah. Yes. Oh, Robert. It's hard to see on this side.
Yeah, we came in a little late, but we saw most of it.
Good.
It's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
What was the biggest surprise in the installation on the ceiling? I guess my question is, how did you imagine from that small mobile that you did in your kitchen and envision it in this massive space? I mean, was there any surprise ultimately in how it turned out?
The most surprising part is that our plans worked. But like really worked without any glitches. That's right, we had one glitch. Not all the fasteners were sent, but that was nothing. They were sent the next day. So that was great. But I think the real reason it wasn't super duper surprising is that I knew I just had to get my painting up into the sky. And I understand the mechanics of my paintings. I mean, I'd like to put more of those leaves up there, but the paintings, that's what helped me really get that up there. And then the team. I mean, I couldn't have done it without the team. Really, I almost did nothing. Just a few colors. Hi.
I have a different kind of question. Did anyone feel it necessary, or was it actually done, to consult with the museum's insurance carrier in case anything?
Can you talk a little bit about that?
We did speak with someone, our board of trustees, who's a lawyer, and we had a liability clause built into our contract, and we got a new engineering plan written up, just kind of reevaluating and reconfirming the characteristics of the ceiling. And that's why the sculpture really took a few different forms that you saw her go
Well, really till the end. I called it hanging knives. William Busey, I don't think so. Yes, you're invited to have drinks and refreshments on both floors. Yes.